If you've been to a lot of fine restaurants, good food and a nice atmosphere are your minimum expectations. But you don't often see the owner making a show of the nightly featured menu or working as hard as Mr. Tony of Tony Stella's Good Fellows restaurant. He started washing dishes, learned from Mama, saved his money, and took the risk.
My name is Tony Stella. I'm born and raised in a town called Plains, Pennsylvania. I'm in the restaurant business some 30 years. Family man, enjoy what I do.
You really do enjoy what you do, Tony. We ask you to be on this show because you're unlike most restaurateurs. You have a personality. The experience of going to Tony Stella's Good Fellows restaurant, which purely coincidentally is around the corner from WVIA, is a memorable experience.
Well, thank you. And memorable, I'd like people to always, it's always better when somebody else brags about you. It started in 1994 as a little mom and pop place, if you will. And a character, Mr. Tony, if you will, started to take a restaurant business to another level where he would feature each table. And I had that idea, as opposed to perhaps not being featured in certain restaurants, but if I could ad lib and go over some features every day with a chef and tell people what they may or may not have, almost like food shopping when you're hungry, you will order.
Yeah, let's we're going to get ahead of ourselves here. Mr. Tony, third person, you talked about Mr. Tony, he's you.
It is me, you know, it's a character, formulated a character. An old customer of mine once said, he's a fictitious character, but he makes everyone feel at home. And it's kind of like eating in Mr. Tony's home. You're there, you're part of his family, and he enables you to enjoy, whether it be your drink, your dinner, your appetizer, a little bit more with the memorable experience.
There are restaurants on the proverbial every corner. Northeastern Pennsylvania has restaurants everywhere. There's a famous saying that I'm sure a guy like you has heard. If you want to make a small fortune in the restaurant business, start with a large fortune.
A large fortune, of course. You know, I think they have a choreographed or characterized as one of the hardest businesses. I never looked at it like that. I started again in 1980 at the Woodlands and worked 12 years. And I always had a passion for food and to match different wines perhaps or drinks with that. 90% of the people out there don't make it after the first year.
90%?
At least. You know,
who open a restaurant.
Very difficult. A lot of people want to open a restaurant. You know what? Stay with what you know. It's a difficult task. Requires time, multiple hours, and you miss everything. You know, if there's a party at your home on a Friday and you invite me, I certainly will apologize, but I couldn't be there. So you do miss a lot. So you have to have that passion and drive to make it work. And then you're still not guaranteed.
Tony, we have had so many people on this program series. I'm trying to find a delicate way, but I don't need to. We know each other well enough. The role of ethnicity, the resolve that comes from family, the lessons you learned from your father and mother. And I know you well enough to know that those people are precious to you.
Precious, that's the precise word. You know, growing up in that Italian family, always watching mom or dad cook and try different things, and it was always a big to-do. You just didn't eat quickly in the house, you know. Whatever meal it was, you sat, you chit-chat, and you just enjoyed your food. Sundays would be, of course, in every Italian family, probably every other family from years ago, and it would be a long, memorable experience, and that's what I try to do in the restaurant, Good Fellows, and that's what we're noted for. No one's ever rushed, and we bring back those secrets of mom and dad and probably every household that it cooks, where you're sitting with that perfect partner you have in your life, or your children, or your family members, and you make it a memorable experience. It's a party every day.
Tell us about your father and mother, in particular with Fernando as your father.
Correct, Fernando. He's a great man. 86 when he passed. He was a coal miner for 20 years, worked construction. The reason he was a coal miner back then in the early days, he explained to me where you either got drafted or you could bypass the draft but work in the mines. The big industry, of course, being coal. His dad was a tough guy. Nothing I could have done in the restaurant business or went through that particular day could have been as tough as he had it, and he let me know that.
Did he?
From time to time.
And how did he, from time to time, let you know that?
Well, he'd be at the house every day at 7 o'clock, no matter what time I got home that particular evening.
Or early morning.
Or early morning, correct. He'd have a coffee ready for me and he'd say, let's get going. And I'd say, you know, Dad, I had a late night last night. We made some money, people stayed, and we were pumping food out and blah, blah, blah.
You had the restaurant at this time.
Correct. And he used to say, get in the car, you go do your books, I'll check your orders, I'll give you a break. So I would go over to the restaurant with him, do my books from the previous evening, and he would check all the orders, all the purveyors knew him. And then he'd drop me back off at the house and he'd say, I saw enough of you today.
Did you get a nap?
No nap. Never a nap.
You'd be back at work shortly thereafter.
Right. You just try to get a run in or maybe a light lunch, do something that you maybe have a hobby with for an hour, and then you're back and you're there until the endless hours of the night. The restaurant business.
You called your mom, and still do, Tina. That was for Clementina.
Correct, yeah.
It's a lovely name.
Thank you. Mom was special. She comes from a family of 13. Interesting story with Mom. Her mom passed away when she was 9, and back then the county wanted to take the children away from my grandfather. What capacity was he going to raise 13 children?
13 kids. Mom dies at how old?
Her mom dies at 9. When my mom was 9, so she must have been in her late 40s, early 50s, probably late 40s. And my grandfather then instructed his 2 eldest, my Uncle Frank and Aunt Anna, to quit school and get a job, therefore bringing more money in so the family could stay as a unit together. And that's exactly what happened.
There was not a small amount of that in that generation.
It was a tough generation, boy. They were born and raised here, both grandparents, Mom and Dad being the first generation born and raised here. But such a hard life. You know, you're surviving the Depression, you know, very hard.
Your pride in your ethnic history is evident in the document you put together for us. There's an expression here, or I'm sorry, a sentence, and I'll quote it. Raised in Plains as the only child of, quote, purely ethnic Italian parents, end quote. What are purely ethnic Italian parents?
You know, I would characterize that as just you wake up in the morning and they're speaking Italian, and of course English, but relatives coming over constantly, borrowing this, doing that. And as we would say, tutto italiano, everything was Italian. The food. They would make breakfast seem Italian, you know? So everything they did was Italian. Growing up in a neighborhood, which keep in mind, Keystone section of Plains had 300 people, 300 Italians coming from the same province in Perugia, because again, mining was the industry. And the first couple that came over would call the rest and say, there's places to stay, there's work. So therefore, you're growing up in a town, and it's right between Hudson and Oakwood Park, Laughlin, where you have 300 people, and I think they were the only 300 people in all of Plains that were Italian.
At what stage in your mother's life, being the child of parents who had 13 kids, at what age were you when you were born in your mother's life?
Well, I was born in '62, so Mom must have been in her late 30s. 2 miscarriages, then me, and I think back then, of course, it was too speculative to have another child in your late 30s. A little scary.
You probably become the first only child in that extended family.
In that extended family, and 95% of my first cousins are in their 50s and 60s, first cousins. The second and third cousins are 20s, 30s. So again, my parents could have actually been my grandparents.
You are a restaurateur, a classic, and so much more than that. And in the notes and in conversations we've had in the past, you talk about your mom in almost a reverential way in terms of food, the impact she had on you, and what not too many years later grew up to be an instinct for you that you wanted to be in the food business.
Correct. Right after school, doing a small stint at Misericordia, I landed up at the Woodlands, and back then the dynasty was the Kornfels and Greco, the master marketer and the master administrators, and they had the dynasty. And just working there and going back to Mom and saying, my mom was special because Mom would concoct dishes with, I'd say, well, let me write it down. There's no measurements. It was this pinch there, but every time she made it, you know, the big thing in a restaurant is consistency.
Of course.
And with those pinches, it was always consistent, where I can't figure it out, you know? And I think that was her gift.
And you tried real hard.
I tried, and it doesn't work as well. I have to have everything measured. So, interesting.
You remember the first time had dinner in your restaurant and you came to present the table. And we want to talk about presentation, which is really a gift of yours. You talked about Mama. When you did the list of items that night, you talked about Mama's sauce.
Again, there's so many Italian restaurants and they're all good. I just wanted to have that unique place where it's borderline, if you want that veal parmesan, of course we'll make it. My chefs will make it. But I wanted to do something where Mama had this sauce, which was a slow-cooked 4-hour reduction sauce. A couple special ingredients she would place in there. So I had her teach my chef. In the beginning days, actually, Mama used to come in with my father on a Sunday or Monday and make a couple big batches of sauce. And we give pasta. When in Rome, we gave pasta with every entree. Not as much a vegetable, although you may have it. But we did give pasta, and it was Mama's smooth red. And people love it. Children love it. Adults love it. And I still get people that come in regularly and ask for jars to take home for their Sunday dinner.
There's expressions that go on around northeastern Pennsylvania about the wonderful old Italian restaurants, and you probably know this. Somebody would tell somebody else about a restaurant in some distant corner that you needed 10 turns to get to, and you would look at the outside and you would tell somebody you'd never go in that place unless you knew that it was great food.
That is so true. In my place, my original place in West Pittston, it was such a deceiving place. It looked like maybe a corner bar or even a home. Very deceiving on that back road in Exeter. And to this day, I still remember my father's words. I don't know how you made it on a back road in Exeter. But very deceiving. But once you came in, it was that bit of Shangri-La where you had the soft jazz. You remember that place.
Remember it well.
You'd come in, you'd have a little Italian music, soft jazz, the mustard colors with the burgundy or rosa bologna, if you will. So it was that little bistro. And when you were there, we took you away from whatever it was that was stressful in your life. And maybe you thought you were in that New York bistro or perhaps Italy. When you got back outside, you were in West Pittston.
You're right. You were right on the Susquehanna River. And I guess an expression grew up that your restaurant was called the Susquehanna Riviera.
I always made a joke. People born and raised in the area, I love it, and you always get the biggest bang for your buck in this area, and you're so close to many things. And when the out-of-towners started coming in the early 90s, and they were from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or Salt Lake City, just businessmen, on weeknights and weekends. I'd say, where are we at here? What is this town? Because they've been taken there. I'd say, you're on the Susquehanna Riviera. And it's so true, right?
You talked earlier about, I call it presentation. You call it featuring. But one of the first time I had dinner in your restaurant, I can remember it, didn't know you at all. I had been told by somebody, the typical, you gotta try this guy's restaurant. Sat down and this man came over. There's no reason to believe at that point he's the owner. And he proceeds to do a remarkable presentation of that night's items. And that was you, the owner. I thought it was almost theatrical. There was a flair to it. Something I had never seen, and been to a lot of restaurants, had never seen in another restaurant. And then the food came and it was incredible. So it wasn't just theater.
Thank you so much for those compliments. Really do. Taken to my heart. I appreciate it. What makes what I do worthwhile, And that's the passion that grows in me from people like you. We do put on a show every night. I have the same crews from pretty much day one. So inevitably, when you do arrive, when anybody arrives, they're greeted as you were that evening, taken to your table. A person will fluff your napkin, a waiter perhaps, and introduce himself and ask you for a drink order. After he leaves, Giuseppe pops right in with hot Toscano bread and that traditional famous, I'd like to think famous, roasted garlic sauce.
Mama's?
Actually, no, Mr. Tony's. That is a great sauce for bread, which is an additive as opposed to butter, although we do offer butter as well. So again, it's a play on wheels, and I always say we're a well-oiled machine. Allow the machine to work for you. And when one person leaves the table, the other is there. And upon leaving with the bread, the waiter comes back with your drink and lets you know that Mr. Tony will be over to feature you momentarily.
And they call you Mr. Tony.
Mr. Tony. And now you've had your drink in front of you, you have your bread, you're satisfied. They're the adult pacifiers.
Okay, adult pacifiers. Mr. Tony comes over, and folks, I've asked Mr. Tony, my guest Tony Stella, to do that featuring, if you will. So tell us tonight's features, as if I'm seated at the table and you're doing that featuring.
Well, again, I would come over and introduce myself and say thank you for coming. Keeping in mind, everything is bought today and made to order at Good Fellows. Any special request is always adhered to. Tonight, to start, we do have our spadini alla romano, and I explain exactly what it is. Spadini would be a small ball of buffalo mozzarella cheese wrapped with prosciutto, encrusted with locatelli romano cheese, cooked, served with a Kalamata red olive white wine garlic caper sauce. Spadini. I try to repeat it back. It is a description. I'll let you know at the end what it is as well. We also make ravioli every day. My chefs do a great job. They make their own dough. Tonight we're featuring 2 shrimp and crab meat raviolis in a vodka sauce, seafood ravioli. I mentioned a soup, which is my house special, a tomato, basil, shrimp, Parmesan cream. That is a phenomenal soup made from day one, and that can be had with or without the shrimp if there's a vegetarian in the house. Everything does come with pasta with Mama Stella sauce, smooth red, and a romaine salad. One dressing throughout the 17 years of Good Fellows. It's a virgin olive oil balsamic vinegar. You have the right of saying gorgonzola cheese or not, which is a nice Roquefort almost. Then I'll proceed to tell them tonight that the salmon is Norwegian filet, no silver skin. It's blackened lightly with cayenne black and white pepper over room temperature spinach, onions, tomatoes, and balsamic vinegar in a delicate honey Dijonnaise salmon. And last but not least, tonight we do have my signature filet mignon. It is a 9-ounce center-cut Angus certified filet, 2-inch slit in the middle, and a 4-ounce lobster tail inside, cognac brandy mushroom sauce on top. Filet. Buon appetito. And the waiter would take it from there.
The reason, ladies and gentlemen, those of you watching, that I asked Tony to do that is not at all to promote his menu tonight. I wanted you to see what is most unusual and unique about Tony Stella's Good Fellows restaurant. How many times have we gone to a restaurant where the owner comes over and does that? It always struck me as pretty unusual, and you do it effortlessly from memory. And I've learned from a couple of people who work for you, who you gave us permission to talk to, that you can go back and cook it. You're not just the front.
That is my insurance. Although I have a great crew, and I wouldn't be where I am today without that crew. They're the best in the game. They truly are. God forbid emergencies happen in life. If some emergency, well, 1996, thank God it was so long ago, the last emergency was everything turned out okay, but one of my chef's stepfather had a heart attack. He drove to Philly, and we were jammed on a Saturday night. So then I take the liberty, I go behind there, and I can concoct, and that is my insurance policy, although I'm better in the front.
It's pretty remarkable, it seems to me, that you're the presenter, you're the showman. It's theater, it's excellence on so many levels, and it's not a specialty. You can go back and cook it. You manage it. You do the ordering. You're capable of doing it all. That seems to me somewhat unusual.
That's the part I think that is the hardest, because I always make a joke and I tell the guys, you know, Tim and Gino and John and Giuseppe are so free with their time with me to try to take some of the burden off, and I always tease them. I say that's why I'm bleeding inside, but I do try to handle everything and book the parties, but now the boys are taking a lot off my load, and I'm happy for that.
All right, you gave us permission. I hope you don't regret this day. You gave us permission to talk to 2 of these guys who you give so much credit to. And I have to tell you, they pulled no punches. They said what they thought and what they felt, and that I think gives you a lot of credit. Should I tell you? I guess I shouldn't tell you who said what, but you'll probably be able to figure it out. One of them said, Tony can be a handful at times.
Yeah, certainly. Yes, I could. I demand the best, and that's why I think they've stayed with me, because by being so demanding throughout the years and showing them a system that works, we run the old-fashioned front and back waiter system, which not too many restaurants do do that today. It's the epitome of fine dining. They stayed, and you know, you have to be hard sometimes, but they stayed, and hence the well-oiled machine.
The rest of that statement, Tony can be a handful at times, but is a great boss. Demanding, impatient, perfectionist, and this is what you want in a boss in the restaurant business.
Oh, thank God. So nice to hear from that. Who might that be?
I'm not telling you. Tony is all about the quality of the food he serves, wants to make it the best experience for the guests. I ask them, why are you here after all these years? Why are you still with them when we see in the restaurant business constant turnover? People come, and you don't know who your waiter is going to be next week. And this gentleman said, we can all make money here. And that's important.
It does help.
There are great relationships with everyone, and these are the two things you as a waiter look for: the ability to make money and relationships with people. So you've made that gentleman happy. This person also said you were one of the hardest working restaurateurs in the business. I've been to countless restaurants where the owner is a passive person, sits back and watches it unfold. She or he may walk around and shake hands, but they're certainly not presenting the night. They're not. You walk around constantly. You're at a clip the whole night that you're there.
You know what? And I would say, Mr. Kelly, that would be the only reason I think that the failure rate is so high. If we had more restaurateurs, men or women, regardless of the fact, if they were out working and moving, it does cut your degree of difficulty down as far as failure. So I constantly move, but I'm happy doing it, and I constantly watch, and the crew enables my job to be easier because I watch and everything's being done.
There's another wonderful gentleman who's been with you about 10 years. You're going to figure this out in no time. Good fella, good Italian fella. Good fellow, pardon the expression, double entendre there. His name, of course, is Giuseppe. And he likes the fact that you're not reluctant to ask advice of him.
You have to. How could I ever imagine to think I have the answers, you know? So I am open to scrutiny as well.
Giuseppe sometimes feels like your father.
He does. He's a good man, you know. They're all great guys, and Giuseppe and I have a nice bond, a unique bond, and at times I do ask him, and he's right there.
It impresses Tony. I'm sorry, Giuseppe. It impresses Giuseppe, particularly when you were still in Pittston, that on a slow night, I guess, or any time you could, you would pick up the phone and call people to ask about their life. You're a relationships guy.
We do make relationships, and you know, when 2007, when everything happened with the economy and it tightened up, times did get a little tough. I mean, for every business in this country, and you know, to have the resiliency to pick up a phone and say to a certain customer, "How are you? How have you been?" Or maybe I remembered that it was a particular birthday, which we do keep notes on, and wished them a happy birthday. That may have planted that seed for them to come out with some people that particular week, and it's never-ending business. It's 100% every day you have to put into it, and doing that, again, lowers the degree of difficulty for you. So,
I guess one of the points I want to make, Tony, you've seen enough of these interviews to know that we do them for people, many of whom aspire to be you or somebody else in a different business, and we've established the fact that your business, restaurants, and somebody who was here earlier, the printing business, very difficult businesses to sustain. I think the point needs to be made to our audience that you didn't walk into it. You didn't inherit it. You didn't have a lot of money. You had to work at it. You put a good number of years into learning it the hard way, didn't you?
yeah, again, when I did that 3-month stint at Misericordia, I no longer wanted to go to college at that time. It happened to be 1980. And my father, again, was there. He was very brilliant with his words. He said, well, you're going to have to work. So I remember my cousin had got me a job at the Woodlands. So I started as a busboy. As I put in my notes, and for you, it was not easy. It was 3 to midnight every day as a busboy, and then I did that for years, and a job happened to open up for a banquet bartender. So I saw a little advertisement in the paper for the Sterling Annex in Wilkes-Barre at the time for the Northeastern Bartending School. And I was cleaning airplanes at Avoca.
Cleaning airplanes?
From 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. A DC-9 and a 727 with an old partner of mine, and my uncle had got me that job. So I would come home, and I would take this $500 and I invested in the Northeastern Bartending School, allowing myself to be trained as opposed to being a burden to my employer at the time. So when the job came open as a bartender for weddings, they placed me at the banquet bartender at the Woodlands. From that, I moved into the 25th hour, always being aggressive and hustling and doing exactly what I was told at any given moment in time. It was all respect. And again, I worked for the 2 greatest bosses I've had, and the privilege of working for my whole life, the Corn Fellows and Tom Greco, who had been partners at the time. And then they purchased Market Street Square, the station, in 1988. 35 of us happened to go there. I had been one of the 35. And then it was time to leave. And in 1992.
What do you mean it was time to leave?
Well, you know, having the notion of 12 years already under the cuff, always
working for somebody else.
Working for somebody else. If I were going to do the 14, 15 hours, 13 hours a day, hopefully, how much better would it be for myself as opposed to for someone else?
Meanwhile, you're saving money through all these years.
Saving money because you're never going out. You have no time to go out. You're working. So when you're working from noon until 3 or 2 p.m. to 3 in the morning, you get one day off and you usually spend it alone, home. You're relaxing, you're recouping. And that's it. And it was the same every day. And I worked with a great crew that I still keep in touch with throughout those years. And it's evident because the Cornfells and Greco come for dinner still today. And the respect is mutual.
So the point I want to make to my audience is, and I've heard this from so many other entrepreneurs, the importance of setting money aside. You give credit to the fact you didn't have time to spend it, or did you have a vision that someday that money would be necessary?
I had the vision, but again, not being in college at the time, or going through college, I should say, I had this, quote, sock as whatever I could away, because aspiring to have a restaurant someday, but no money doesn't float it. And my mom and dad were so giving, I took nothing from them. They offered whatever they had to give, which wasn't a lot, and I said, no, I want to do this on my own. I told my father, I said, I shave every day. I want to look that man in the mirror and make sure he did it himself. And that's where I bought that little place on a back road, and I happened to be the 7th buyer, or the 7th person to purchase, to go and try to purchase it from Mr. Jack Ruan at the time. And it was just, timing was perfect. One of the bouncers who worked at Market Street became a realtor, and he pulled me to this place in Exeter, and I took my life savings. And
you had tried other places you couldn't afford.
I couldn't afford them. Di Brutico was for sale at the time. Carlo Rocco Grandi was for sale at the time. And I think it was fate, and it was a blessing, because, you know, I don't think I would be as well known down there. I was from the Plains area, and I was right across the river at this point, as opposed to going to South Wilkes-Barre.
Well, you're the 1 in 10, the 1 in 10 who I think you would conclude has made it in the restaurant business.
I don't know. I'd like to think so after 30 years doing it, 17 on my own. But, you know, every day is an even slate. It's a blank slate again. We've been busy in this economy. I thank God we're very busy. But, you know, today's a new day. And my father used to remind me of that, too. No matter what business you're in, you made money yesterday, today you have to make money.
How was your interview?
It was a pleasure.
Besides over.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.